Hey, Jane, you look like you're in a hurry.
Yeah, things are a little crazy.
Oh, yeah, what's going on?
Oh, it's nothing. Well, since it,
Now, we've got a few minutes before we leave for today, so I'll just touch on an interesting subject that I think makes an important point. We've been covering rocks and different types of rocks for the last several weeks, but next week we're going to do something a bit different. And to get started, I thought I'd mention something that shows how, as a geologist, you need to know about more than just rocks and the structure of solid matter. Moving rocks. You may have heard about them. It's quite a mystery. Death Valley is this desert plain, a dry lake bed in California surrounded by mountains, and on the desert floor are these huge rocks, some of them hundreds of pounds, and they move. They leave long trails behind them, tracks you might say, as they move from one point to another. But nobody has been able to figure out how they're moving, because no one has ever seen it happen. Now, there are a lot of theories, but all we know for sure is that people aren't moving the rocks. There are no footprints, no tire tracks, and no heavy machinery, like a bulldozer. Nothing was ever brought in to move these heavy rocks. So what's going on? Theory number one, wind. Some researchers think powerful windstorms might move the rocks. Most of the rocks move in the same direction as the dominant wind pattern, from southwest to northeast. But some, and this is interesting, move straight west, while some zigzag, or even move in large circles. How can that be? How about wind combined with rain? The ground of this desert is made of clay. It's a desert, so it's dry. But when there is the occasional rain, the clay ground becomes extremely slippery. It's hard for anyone to stand on, walk on. Some scientists theorize that perhaps when the ground is slippery, the high winds can then move the rocks. There's a problem with this theory. One team of scientists flooded an area of the desert with water, then tried to establish how much wind force would be necessary to move the rocks. And get this, you need winds of at least 500 miles an hour to move just the smallest rocks. And winds that strong have never been recorded, ever, not on this planet. So I think it's safe to say that that issue's been settled. Here's another possibility. Ice. It's possible that rain on the desert floor could turn to thin sheets of ice when temperatures drop at night. So if rocks become embedded in ice, could a piece of ice with rocks in it be pushed around by the wind? But there's a problem with this theory too. Rocks trapped in ice together would have moved together when the ice moved. But that doesn't always happen. The rocks seem to take separate routes. There are a few other theories. Maybe the ground vibrates, or maybe the ground itself is shifting, tilting. Maybe the rocks are moved by a magnetic force. But sadly, all these ideas have been eliminated as possibilities. There's just no evidence. I bet you're saying to yourself, well, why don't scientists just set up video cameras to record what actually happens? Thing is, this is a protected wilderness area, so by law, that type of research isn't allowed. Besides, in powerful windstorms, sensitive camera equipment would be destroyed. So why can't researchers just live there for a while until they observe the rocks moving? Same reason. So where are we now? Well, right now we still don't have any answers. So all this leads back to my main point. You need to know about more than just rocks as geologists. The researchers studying moving rocks, well, they combine their knowledge of rocks with knowledge of wind, ice, and such. Not successfully, not yet, but they wouldn't even have been able to get started without earth science understanding, knowledge about wind, storms, meteorology. You need to understand physics. So for several weeks, like I said, we'll be addressing geology from a wider perspective. I guess that's all for today. See you next time. Now, we've got a few minutes before we leave for today, so I'll just touch on an
Hey,
interesting
Jane, you look
subject
like you're in
that
a
I
hurry.
think makes an important point. We've been covering rocks and different types of rocks for the last... Now, we've got a few minutes before we leave for today, so I'll just touch on an interesting subject that I think makes an important point. We've been covering rocks and different types of rocks for the last several weeks, but next week we're going to do something a bit different. And to get started, I thought I'd mention something that shows how, as a geologist, You need to know about
you
more
need to
than just
know about
rocks
more
and
than
structure of
just
solid matter.
the structure of
Moving
solid matter,
rocks.
moving
You may
rocks.
have heard about
You
them.
may have heard of them.
It's quite a
It's
mystery.
quite a mystery.
Death Valley is this
Death
desert
Valley
plain,
is a
a dry
desert
lake
plain,
bed
a
in
dry lake
California
bed in
surrounded by
California,
mountains,
surrounded by
and on the desert
mountains, and
floor are
on the
these
desert
huge
floor are
rocks,
these huge
some of them
rocks.
hundreds of pounds, and
Hundreds
they
of
move.
pounds, and they move.
They leave long
They
trails
will
behind them,
toward
tracks you
and
might say,
trucks
as they
you
move
might
from
have
one point to
seen
another.
one to
But
another.
nobody has been
But
able to
nobody
figure out
has been
how they're
able to
moving,
figure out
because
how
no
they
one has ever
because no
seen
one
it
has
happen.
ever seen
Now,
it
there are a
happen.
lot of theories,
No,
but all we know
theories,
for
but
sure
all
is
we
that
know
people
few
aren't moving the
people
rocks. There are no footprints, no tire
no
tracks, and
no
no heavy
title, no
machinery,
heavy
like a
machinery,
bulldozer.
like bulldozer.
Nothing was ever brought in to
Nothing
move
was
these
ever
heavy
brought
rocks.
into move them.
So what's going
So
on?
what's going on?
Theory number
Theory
one,
number one,
wind.
wind.
Some researchers
Some
think
researchers
powerful
think powerful
windstorms might move the rocks. Most of the rocks
Most of
move
the
in the
rock
same
moves
direction
in
as
the
the
same
dominant wind
as the
pattern,
wind
from
pattern from
southwest to northeast.
southwest and northeast.
But some, and this is interesting, move straight west, while some zigzag, or even move in large circles. How can that be?
How can that be?
How about wind combined with rain? The ground of this desert is made of clay. It's a desert, so it's dry. But when there is the occasional rain, the clay ground becomes extremely slippery. It's hard for anyone to stand on, walk on. Some scientists theorize that perhaps when the ground is slippery, the high winds can then move the rocks. There's a problem with this theory. One team of scientists flooded an area of the desert with water, then tried to establish how much wind force would be necessary to move the rocks. And get this, you need winds of at least 500 miles an hour to move just the smallest rocks. And winds that strong have never been recorded, ever, not on this planet. So I think it's safe to say that that issue's been settled. Here's another possibility, ice. It's possible that rain on the desert floor could turn to thin sheets of ice when temperatures drop at night. So if rocks become embedded in ice, okay, could a piece of ice with rocks in it be pushed around by the wind? But there's a problem with this theory too. Rocks trapped in ice together would have moved together when the ice moved, but that doesn't always happen. The rocks seem to take separate routes. There are a few other theories. Maybe the ground vibrates, or maybe the ground itself is shifting, tilting. Maybe the rocks are moved by a magnetic force, but sadly all these ideas have been eliminated as possibilities. There's just no evidence. I bet you're saying to yourself, well, why don't scientists just set up video cameras to record what actually happens? The thing is, this is a protected wilderness area, so by law that type of research isn't allowed. Besides, in powerful windstorms, sensitive camera equipment would be destroyed. So why can't researchers just live there for a while until they observe the rocks moving? Same reason. So where are we now? Well, right now we still don't have any answers. So all this leads back to my main point. You need to know about more than just rocks as geologists. The researchers studying moving rocks, well, they combine their knowledge of rocks with knowledge of wind, ice, and such. Not successfully, not yet, but they wouldn't even have been able to get started without earth science understanding, knowledge about winds, storms, meteorology. You need to understand physics. So for several weeks, like I said, we'll be addressing geology from a wider perspective. I guess that's all for today. See you next time. Now, we've got a few